The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are the speaker's own and does not represent legal or accounting advice or counsel and should not be seen as such. The material and information presented here is for general information purposes only, a conversation. We make no promises or assertions on how this information will impact your business, your personal life, or financial well-being. The information relayed does not imply endorsement or offer opposition to any specific organization, product, or services. Welcome to Shift. I'm your host, Lori Power, and I'm looking forward to our conversation. Thank you so much, Trudy, for joining me today. I'm really looking forward to broadening the scope of what we're talking about with exit planning into the family enterprise. Can you take a moment and tell me a little bit about your business currently? And perhaps if it works, can you give me a little bit of the evolution?
I'm excited to be here with you. This is now our second conversation, and you're a woman who's got fire and passion. So, we're kindred spirits. Yeah, so great. So the Family Stewardship Group is brand new. I got my logo yesterday, and part of the evolution is I started in business 18 years ago. My company was named Simply More. And then in late 2017, early 2018, I rebranded myself to Trudy Pelletier Consulting. And I'm in the process of going through a new brand and a new name. And that has all been driven by my legacy. So last summer, I met an advisor. And I had decided as a very young entrepreneur that I wanted to be in the trenches with my clients. And I meet this advisor and I say, "Are you interested in that family facilitation?" And he says, "I don't know why." And I said, "Because, I have a body of work that is proven and well developed, and maybe I could share that with you and mentor and support you." And it began a conversation with myself that took me to meet a brand company. And the first thing Treya said is, "Well, nobody's going to invest or be interested in a body of work named after a person. So you need to change your company name." And went through the process. Family Stewardship Group is my heart's passion. It is the reason that I've been put on this planet. And that started 15 years ago. So I was actually in corporate Calgary serving in custom communication. And I went to an event put on by the Canadian Association of Family Enterprise. And I say forces were at work because I didn't know anything about family business. I don't know how I was on their list. I don't know why I registered. And that was a full day of learning. And there was a 3-generation family talking about the complexities of working together. And the elderly lady says, "And now we're undergoing succession planning, and our conflict has gone from 3 to 130 in 30 seconds." And she snaps her fingers. And by this time, I'm standing at the back of the room because it's mid-afternoon. And my heart is pounding, and I'm completely enthralled in their story. And I think to myself, that's what I've been put on the planet to do. Except I didn't know anything about family business. So I went out on an information gathering mission and was hired by 2 families, not to do the work that I do today, to do some leadership development and team building within their businesses. Very quickly, I got introduced to the Family Enterprise Advisor Program, came home that night and registered at the advice of someone, Ruth Steverlink, who's well known in our field, who said, "If you're serious about this business or this industry, then you need to go take this course." So I was one of the first people. I think I was in there's some debate, the first or the second cohort. We were out of UBC Sauder School of Business for the Family Enterprise Advisor Program.
There are some business owners that do consider themselves a family enterprise, mostly because the family all knows what they do, but it is not a family enterprise in so much that I've hired my spouse or I have my children working with me or we're intergenerational. Can you help me understand the main difference between when somebody considers themselves maybe a sole incorporated entrepreneur to the family enterprise?
Well, it's interesting because I have actually a talk that says every business is a family business. Why? Because you come from a family, you may have a family of your own. And often, even if you are like that sole entrepreneur that is building, often the culture of a business takes on and is shaped and colored by the values. Family enterprises are known to have tremendous loyalty for that reason. So, when I work with family enterprise or family businesses, they get to say who family is. I don't do that for them. And the context of being a family business comes down to what future are they creating. So you're a certified exit planning advisor, as am I added that designation, I think, about 3.5 years ago. Doesn't matter. And it expanded my ability to support actually any kind of business who's doing succession planning. And even if you're partners in business, and I have worked with partners in business who had no spouses or children working in the business, but we had two families that were at the impact of the decisions that these two, and these happen to be patriarchs, two patriarchs were making for their families regarding the business and the wealth that had been generated. So it depends on a little bit of that legacy, what they're building. It also depends on how they see themselves and whether or not there is a heart's desire to have family involved. 2 years ago, I started working with a family, and everybody referred to the wealth as family money. And I asked the patriarch, why is this family money? And he said, well, everything I did has been built for my family. So that context alone can create the view that we need to take on some planning because it's all been done for my family.
You make an excellent point, and touche to you for saying that. Yes, every business is a family business, and you are right. Contextually, though, we do make a difference between what is perhaps a partnership where there's no link between the members or the partnership in that familial area. It is a pillar, right? It is a pillar because however somebody is looking at your business, you can't discount spouse and children into that where you're going to go in your business. So I do like the way that you have outlined it, that every business is a family business for that very reason, unless they are a single person with no family behind them. But really, so long as they have a belly button, they've had an umbilical cord, right? So
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And so it's 15 years that I've been working with family businesses and family enterprise. And I can tell you that at least 80% of the families that I have worked with, one of the risks is that the matriarch and patriarch have very different visions about what the next, chapter in life. And I know there's lots of new words for retirement, but what that next chapter looks like. So again, even if you don't consider yourself a family business, there is still a need to do some personal planning in the financial realm as well as in the personal realm, reinventing themselves. What does that next chapter and what will their new purpose and passion be? And, many business owners don't have that defined because that passion has been the business that they've been building. And now it's time to, perhaps exit or transition.
and it's interesting the dynamic too that you have talked about between the spouses, because I have talked to business owners who have one idea only to take that idea home to the spouse and go, well, I'm not quite sure who you're doing that with, but I'm planning on retiring XYZ and in this particular location with or without you.
Yes.
Which
And as human beings, we tend to walk around like it'll all work itself out. And it only ever gets worked out in conversations. So, now's the perfect time rather than telling each other, leaning in and really creating that next step in that new life from a perspective of some deep thinking, which most of us resist, and also having our values identified, articulated, and defined.
And taking the time, right? We're so wrapped up in our busy lives that just taking the time to have those conversations, be open and critical to previous thoughts and where those may transition to and be pivotal to our going forward in whatever way, shape, or form that's going to take. Take me through some of the dynamics that you find more often when you're just first working with a client and they've brought you in, they're kind of raw. Take me through what that looks like for you, one of those first things that you're going to do. And I'm going to guess ahead here. I'm sorry, but I always think perhaps it's a bit of calm down.
Yeah, there's at least my experience is for the most part, there's some kind of pressing need, a need to make a decision, which if made, it's going to cause a fracture or a divide, or there's some kind of worry or concern in the background that they're stalled out. Other situations is maybe more visible. I worked with a family that had two different perceptions of entitlement. One was one of the family branches in the third generation appeared to have limited financial literacy and appeared to be living beyond their means, going to the patriarch every year and saying, hey, we need $30,000 more or 50,000 or whatever it might be. And then the other one was one of the family members who was working in the business and showing up later and leaving earlier with no conversation, and had never talked about these openly, these kinds of situations. And right now, that wasn't a problem for the patriarch. The concern came from what I'm going to say, assumed successor or presumed successor. And it's like, wait a minute, when my sibling is coming to me and saying, we need an extra 50,000, or maybe it'll be 150,000, that's just not going to go well ever for us. So often the families with me that have some kind of pressing need and have some visible concerns that they've not been able to talk through, I engage in a discovery process, and that's where I design a suite of custom questions based on the 3-circle model, that being the family system, the business system, and the ownership system. And I do private confidential interviews. And while I'm synthesizing that information, I have them do a values exercise that is very reflective and thoughtful, has people go beyond the surface, really look at what matters to them. And then the conclusion of that engagement is usually a 1-day family meeting where they land on common family values. So it moves from the individual to the family branch, so the spouses, then up to the collective. And, I worked with a family, two brothers and a brother-in-law. There had been a serious divide in the family since the late 90s. And when we did their family values, there were 17 family members in this particular case. They discovered that they were much more closer than what they had ever thought, given the dynamics and the tension. So the values is a really critical part because, one, it shapes and colors all of our decisions, whether articulated. And two, it's actually ground that we can stand on when there are common values. And I haven't worked with a family that doesn't have some solid values to start to leverage to begin to create the future, and also look at what conversations do we need to have to complete the past. And when I say complete, I simply mean that nothing is left unsaid and that people have the experience of being heard, seen, and most importantly, understood.
That's beautiful. I love that. If all families could experience that, is there normally a trigger that will prompt somebody to get in touch? Because they may be thinking they're going along tickety-boo. And I don't mind going and asking dad for $30,000, $50,000. I'm happy to continue this trend. Is there normally a trigger that makes them reach out?
Well, I'm going to say yes and no. And more often it is a trigger of like some significant pain. And that doesn't always mean like a death or a diagnosis, but some significant pain that we can't move forward. We know we have to be making decisions and we can't move forward. Also, there's the experience of we've tried to have this conversation. We've tried this and we've tried that, and it only ever makes things worse. And so that kind of making things worse increases the tension, creates a little bit more distance between people, and really sometimes it becomes so unbearable that that's what causes the action. And I've been brought into families from the founding generation to the second to the third. Like, it really depends on where some of the roles and responsibilities lie, and then the impact of doing nothing. I have another family that it was actually the fourth generation that brought me in. And it really was, we've never talked about this one particular issue. And when you go, I don't know what I'm going to be left to deal with. Like, it is time to do something. And so yes, usually some kind of triggering event, usually pain, and often families wait. And I'm sure you see this even in terms of the exit planning, Lori, wait, too long to begin the conversations.
I think that's amazing that they've made it to 4 generations. And I think it's equally amazing that the fourth generation reached out. That says a lot about not just the company itself, but the existing family dynamics that they were willing to reach out. Because I'm thinking if you've made it to 4 generations, there's a lot to unpack there. I also know, and we know this from statistics of just your regular everyday person, there's nothing gets between a good relationship like money.
Yeah. Yeah.
Money is both a source and an evil, to use the terms lightly. It can provide great, wonderful, beautiful things, but it can also destroy a family. How do
And
you
it's
work
interesting.
around that dynamic?
Yeah, it's so great. And it's not like in this particular family that I just spoke about with the fourth generation. One of the things that Discovery revealed is that there's so much love and respect for the third generation and what got created, that they use that to not have the conversation. So it isn't, I don't want to leave you with the picture of, like the series Succession where, it's yelling and crazy
Oh,
making.
no, I didn't have that
Right?
impression.
Yeah, yeah, great. It's like sometimes there's so much love and respect for what has been built that this one or two things we can't talk about because I'm concerned that you might, think that I don't respect or regard what you have built. So it's, and either way, the doing nothing creates the same kind of uncertainty and tension. And when people have uncertainty and they don't know what to do, they do more of what they know, which often doesn't work.
I can totally relate to that. Like, I'm visualizing this. Now, this may not have been the case with your particular fourth generation uh, company and family enterprise, but it does lead me to ask, if we start a business and we're first generation into it, and then we successfully transition to the second generation, each time we're transitioning, the body of the family is growing. When you get to that fourth generation, now we've got cousins and aunts and uncles, and the family tree has spread quite lusciously. It must be very difficult for whomever is in charge in that third generation to decide who's going to be my next successor and how to build a strategy around who is going to be successful in that next generation.
Well, and the question even, needs to be asked and is it that person's decision to make? Because often, and again, when you've got a founder or maybe even a second generation where there's been a couple of brothers or a smaller sibling team, the decision-making mechanisms that they utilize most likely are not going to be effective for the next generation. So, that's part of the overall planning that's required is how have we been making decisions, and how effective have they been from a perspective of not just making money, right? Of communication, of culture, of family dynamics, and then looking at, is this still what's going to work in the next generation, and who's going to have the authority and decision-making responsibility in the next generation. And then again, in family enterprise, we would say that an owner's skill set is very different than a leader skill set working in the business. And being able to distinguish that, because you're effective leading in a business doesn't necessarily make you having all the right skill sets to own a business. And so being able to distinguish and have people uncollapse, those two things as well.
And I would be remiss, because that's a great segue, but I would be remiss if I didn't ask about employees in these family enterprises, especially when they're going through that succession and transitioning to the next generation. What kind of things do you do to prepare the new successors into taking on and be accepted into that culture from the employees?
Well, everybody wants one answer, the right answer, and there isn't one to that question. And that's actually one of the challenges about my work. And is that, while I have process and I do bring process to complexity, there are times where I'm making it up in the moment to suit the dynamics and or the situation, the short-term goals and the long-term goals. So it's not ever one thing. And there's any number of things. So almost, again, I'm going to say probably in about 85% of the families that I've worked with, I use a couple of different leadership assessments to help the family and non-family talent understand what talent do we have at the table. And I remember serving a family that so there was 12 family members, 7 of which worked in the family business, some of which were in-laws. And in this particular case, the second son was assumed to be the successor, mainly because he really was taking a lot of the patriarch's roles on. And I didn't do the discovery process. It was another facilitator. And what happened is, in that particular case, several family members said, if he becomes the CEO successor, I'm leaving the business. He's a bully.
Oh my.
So I come in, we did lots of work in the family system to resolve some history, created the family governance. Governance is simply structures and agreements by which we operate. And then we moved into the business system and we created principles for succession. And then the question was, who's interested in that successor role? And there was only one other sibling that put up his hand aside from this one that was assumed. And I did leadership assessments to discover that this second brother had a little stronger natural inclination to focus on results rather than people. So it wasn't that he didn't care for people, it's that his natural inclination was to do that, which often left people with the experience of not being cared for. So we created structure within the family members working in the business to support him. We also hired a coach for him with a focus on the social side. And again, putting structures and agreements around to have this person set up for success. So that's one example where, how do you prepare successors? Well, knowing oneself and knowing one's natural preferences and characteristics. And am I the best one suited for the role? I remember, it was early when I was in this field, and, the patriarch had declared the son-in-law the successor. And we did business strategy after doing several elements of the family charter, family constitution. And they were going to double their business in a 5-year period. Now, I knew the son-in-law is not the person to do that. He's not wired that way. And so we did the leadership, I did the leadership assessments, I deliver the data. Part of what I can do in this is model out, your company's going to look like this in 5 years from now. What kind of leader are you going to need? Anyway, I remember, going through the data, and that son-in-law yelled, "Oh, I'm going to run this business just to prove you wrong." Well, what was really cool was let everybody cool down. A week later, I was doing some debriefs because that was a very difficult conversation. And they had done their core values, their family aspirations, and their code of conduct and their family success statement, all of those elements of a family governance charter. And they knew they could not let him become the leader and honor their family governance, which is what they said matters most to them. Now, they had options. They could have pulled back the growth strategy and let him slowly grow the business. But even then, at that double revenue, he probably wasn't the right guy to lead it. Great number two. And as it turns out, they ended up where the daughter in this case became the successor, and he took on the role of number two. So family governance played a really key role in those decisions. And that's one of the things that I think, people can tend to think about family governance as this kumbaya, feel good kind of thing. And it's like critical to making decisions in the business and ownership system, because that's what colors, the dynamics in both of those other two systems.
Do you do a lot of follow-up with the businesses thereafter? So my mind immediately goes to, what did it look like a year later? Was this son-in-law, was there a resentment that just kind of festered a little bit? What did it look like a year later? Do you continue to follow up?
Yeah, I mean, I'm with some families, depending on the level of complexity and what they're up to, for a long period of time. And how it usually goes is, onboarding a family, and then that first year can be some heavy lifting depending on the dynamics. Sometimes in that first year, I'm actually not doing anything in the business system. It's all focused in the family system. And then, yes, there's ongoing follow-up. It becomes less frequent. And one of the things to know about me, and I'm very upfront with families who work with me, so I have a bias. And my bias is communication can resolve anything. The problem is most people stop talking.
Yes.
And they carry around that conversation in their head, and it's consuming time and energy and space. So was there resentment? Listen, when he yelled at me, he was angry. And then there's conversations to be had to have him receive that and use, those values and those family governance structures for them to make decisions, and like being able to have nothing left unsaid. And the primary concern is when you're in a job that does not fit your natural style and characteristics and strengths, there's people unknowingly shape the role to fit their own psychology, which creates a risk to the business. And two, if they keep stepping outside of themselves, and I refer to it like you have to step out of your skin every day to go to work, there's a level of burnout and stress that is proven after a period of time, and no family wants that for a family member. And it does require some difficult conversations and meaningful dialogue.
Well, I'm going to tell you, this has been a great conversation, and that goes without saying. But I have a lot more questions, and we need a lot more time.
Well,
So
I'm happy to come back and be with you anytime. I am.
I want to talk about the patriarch, matriarch, and how they leave. There's a lot I want to unpack, Trudy, and I know that, and I don't want to rush it. That's the big thing, is I want to have a conversation about this, and I don't want to rush it. So I'm really pleased that you'll come back and do this again. Because
Well, can you tell I love talking about this, and particularly family? And my purpose in life, my mission is to liberate and unify families in love and purpose. So anytime, and it is the system that is least cared for. Our history is riddled with families who wasted tremendous wealth and have estrangement and fracture that absolutely didn't need to go that way.
no.
And so for me, the family stewardship, preserving the family, growing the family, liberating the family from the past, and unifying them in purpose. Yeah, that's totally what my life has been dedicated for. And I'll talk with you anytime about that.